where the waste becomes a kingdom. Two women inheriting opposite sides of industrial sin. One inherited survival, the other inherited guilt. Chapter 1. Brown Gold. The first trucks arrived in summer. Talia remembered the heat more than the noise. Texas heat that pressed against the skin like a fevered hand and turned the horizon liquid. At 14, she had stood barefoot on the back porch with a glass of watered-down lemonade in her hand and watched the long white trucks rumble past the Moretti property toward the empty stretch of land beside their farm. At first, nobody thought much of it. The hotel on the edge of town had always been wasteful. Rich people were experts at throwing things away. The trucks dumped crates of spoiled fruit, sacks of wilted vegetables, coffee grounds still wet from the morning rush. Workers in gray uniforms laughed while they unloaded it all beneath the screaming sun. The smell started 3 weeks later. Not strong. Not yet. Just a sourness that drifted across the fields at dusk. Talia's father had stood near the fence line one evening, silent beneath the brim of his hat while cicadas screamed from the trees. "They'll ruin this land," Malcolm Moretti had muttered. And they did. Slowly at first. Then all at once. The dumping spread like disease. Paper filters. Shredded cardboard. Rotting produce. Industrial food waste. Then came the sugarcane remnants, mountains of steaming bagasse and leaves dumped in smoking heaps that baked beneath the Texas sun. The ground changed color. Water in the irrigation trenches turned murky brown. Plants nearest the fence yellowed first, then collapsed into themselves like dying lungs. The Morettis lost crops season after season. Money vanished quietly. Not in dramatic explosions, but in little wounds. Water deliveries. Failed harvests. Equipment repairs they could no longer afford. Talia came home from school every afternoon and worked until dark beside her father. She learned the language of exhaustion before she learned algebra properly. Dirt beneath her fingernails became permanent. So did the ache in her shoulders. And Malcolm began slowing down. At first it was little things. Missing fence posts while hammering. Squinting harder at invoices. Holding newspapers closer to his face. Then one morning Talia caught him reaching for a coffee cup that wasn't there. Fear settled into her chest like wet cement. Still the trucks came. Grayscale hospitality expanded twice during those years. New luxury suites. Rooftop bars. Infinity pools gleaming beneath magazine photographers while the Moretti farm suffocated beside their dumping grounds. Nobody listened to complaints. The council members drove nicer cars every year. Talia learned early that money did not silence conscience. It erased it. By 16, she walked the perimeter of the dumping site almost daily, searching for answers she didn't yet know how to name. The place looked apocalyptic now. Brown mountains rose against the sky. Flies swarmed in black clouds. The air smelled fermented, chemical, wet. Heat shimmered above the piles like ghosts trying to escape. Still she walked. Maybe because anger needed somewhere to go. Maybe because grief did too. That afternoon the sun was merciless. Sweat clung to the back of Talia's neck as she rested her forearms against the sagging wire fence. She stared at the wasteland. At what had happened to their life. A breeze shifted across the heap. Something green caught her eye. Talia frowned. At first she thought it was a trick of sunlight. Then she saw it again. Tiny. Bright. Alive. Her pulse kicked once. She crouched lower, squinting through the rusted fence. Beneath layers of brown sludge and discarded pulp stood a tomato plant, stubborn and vivid against the decay around it. Its leaves were impossibly green. Not sickly. Not struggling. Thriving. Talia glanced behind her instinctively, as though someone else might steal the discovery simply by seeing it. Then she dropped to her knees and crawled beneath the fence. The stench hit harder up close. Rot. Fermentation. Something sour enough to live in the back of the throat. Mud sucked at her boots as she approached the plant carefully, almost reverently. And there it was. One perfect tomato hanging heavy from the vine. Red with streaks of gold. Skin smooth as polished glass. No blemishes. No insect bites. Nothing. Talia reached for it slowly. The fruit came loose with the softest snap. Warm from the sun. For a moment she simply held it in her palm while flies buzzed around the wasteland behind her. Then she lifted it to her mouth. The skin broke clean beneath her teeth. Juice flooded her tongue instantly. Sweet first, then acidic. Bright. Alive. Talia froze. The flavor hit with such force, she actually closed her eyes. This wasn't just good. This was the best tomato she had ever tasted in her life. The flesh inside glowed deep pink and crimson, seeds suspended like jewels beneath sunlight. Every bite tasted concentrated somehow, as if the earth itself had distilled every surviving ounce of goodness into this one impossible thing. Talia stood in the middle of the stench and ruin, chewing slowly, while something dangerous unfolded in the quiet corners of her mind. The trucks. The waste. The heat. The rot. Not poison. Fuel. A slow smile touched the edge of her mouth. Not happy. Not innocent. Hungry. And for the first time in years, Talia Moretti looked at the dumping grounds and saw a future instead of a graveyard. Chapter 2. The Girl Behind the Barn. Talia told nobody about the tomato. Not at first. The secret sat inside her like a live coal. She carried it through school days and long evenings in the fields, through dinners made of canned beans and stale bread, through nights where the old farmhouse creaked beneath winter winds. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that impossible red skin gleaming beneath layers of waste. Fuel. The word rooted itself deep. By October, the library's staff already knew her by name. The little county library smelled of dust, old glue, and sun-warmed paper. Talia would arrive with dirt still on her jeans and exhaustion hanging from her shoulders while other girls her age crowded football games or flirted behind diners. Mrs. Alvarez, the librarian, started leaving books aside for her. Agricultural journals, soil biology, microorganisms, crop regeneration, industrial composting. At first, Talia barely understood half the words. Nitrogen ratios, thermophilic phases, aeration systems. But she learned. Slowly. Obsessively. She copied notes by hand until her fingers cramped. Drew diagrams late into the night. Read until dawn stained the curtains gold. The internet became another battlefield. The Morettis connection was slow enough to make saints swear, but Talia sat through endless buffering screens while researching farming forums and university articles from places she would never see. California, Germany, Japan. People across the world were transforming waste into fertile soil. Meanwhile, Texas was burying it beneath the sun like a corpse nobody wanted to claim. Every evening after dinner, Talia disappeared behind the barn. At first, Malcolm thought she was grieving. Then he thought she was restless. Then winter arrived, and she still kept going. The wheelbarrow squealed through the darkness as she hauled load after load from the dumping grounds. Rotting pulp, sugarcane waste, damp paper fibers, coffee grounds steaming faintly in the cold air. The smell clung to her clothes. Sometimes she would scrub her hands raw and still wake up with the scent trapped beneath her fingernails. Behind the barn, she built her first compost pile. Then another. Then 6 more. Some were too wet. Others too dry. One caught mold so aggressively it collapsed into black slime within days. Another refused to heat at all. Talia nearly cried the night she found maggots boiling through one of the piles. Instead, she burned it down and started again. Failure became routine. But so did stubbornness. The first cold front arrived viciously that year. Texas winters carried a particular cruelty. Not the endless snow of northern states, but sharp wet cold that slipped through denim and settled into bone. Rain hammered the farmhouse roof for days while wind clawed at the loose barn panels. Still Talia worked. She covered her piles with old tarps weighted down by bricks and rusted tools. Checked temperatures with a cheap compost thermometer she bought secondhand from a farmer 3 towns over. Every morning before school. Every evening after dinner. Like prayer. One night Malcolm watched her pulling on boots near the front door while thunder rolled outside. "Tal," he said quietly, "it's damn near freezing." She smiled faintly while tugging her jacket tighter. Microbes don't care about weather. Neither do fools. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. That seemed to please him. Malcolm sank deeper into his chair beneath the blanket over his legs. The lamp beside him painted deep lines across his weathered face. "You're too much like your mother," he murmured. Talia paused. The words landed softly. Dangerously softly. Her mother had been dead 6 years now, but grief still moved through the house like another resident. Quiet. Familiar. Permanent. Talia stepped closer and kissed Malcolm's temple. "Go back to sleep, old man. You keep hauling garbage through storms and I'll haunt you myself. You'd complain the whole time." "Damn right." She grinned and stepped into the rain. The storm swallowed her instantly. Mud clung to her boots as she crossed the yard with a lantern swinging from one hand. Behind the barn, the compost heaps rose like sleeping beasts beneath their tarps. Talia crouched beside the largest pile and peeled back the cover carefully. Steam curled upward. She froze. Slowly, she pushed her hand into the pile. Warm. Not surface warm. Alive warm. Her pulse stumbled. Talia dug deeper, fingers disappearing into dark material that no longer resembled waste at all. The texture had changed completely. Loose. Rich. Earthy. The smell hit next. Not rot. Soil. Fresh rain and forest floor and growing things. Talia inhaled sharply. Again. Again. For one terrifying second, emotion closed around her throat so tightly she could not breathe. Months. Months of failure. Of hauling decay through storms. Of people laughing quietly behind her back in town. Of exhaustion. And here it was. Transformation. She sank onto her heels in the mud while steam drifted around her beneath the freezing rain. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Not wildly. Just one broken little sound of disbelief. Talia scooped up a handful of compost and let it spill slowly through her fingers. Brown gold. By spring, she planted the first rows. Tomatoes first. Then corn. Then strawberries. 3 careful lines carved into the earth behind the barn like promises she was afraid to say aloud. Every morning before sunrise, Talia checked them. Every afternoon after school, she documented changes in a battered notebook already swollen from rain and dirt. Leaf color. Growth rate. Moisture retention. Sun exposure. The plants grew fast. Too fast. By early summer, the tomato vines climbed thick and heavy across their supports, while corn stalks stretched high enough to whisper against the wind. The strawberry plants spread low and vibrant, tiny white blossoms eventually surrendering to bursts of red fruit. The patch behind the barn looked impossible. Like life itself had become greedy. Talia harvested alone the first time. Morning sunlight spilled gold across the fields while she moved carefully between the rows with her mother's old wicker basket hanging from her arm. The tomatoes were warm from dawn. The strawberries smelled sweet enough to make her dizzy. She twisted a corn cob free and stared at the perfect yellow kernels packed tight beneath green husks. For a long moment, she simply stood there, listening. Wind through leaves. Distant cattle. Her own heartbeat. Then she carried the basket toward the farmhouse. Malcolm was sitting at the kitchen table wrapped in his blanket when she entered. "Tal," he called without looking up. She placed the basket gently before him. Silence settled across the kitchen. Malcolm leaned forward slowly. His rough fingers brushed over strawberries first, then tomatoes, then corn. Confusion wrinkled his brow. Sweetheart, his voice sounded thinner lately. Where in God's name did you get all this? Talia said nothing. Malcolm picked up a strawberry carefully and bit into it. The reaction was immediate. His eyes closed. A slow breath escaped him. And for the first time in months, Talia saw something break through the exhaustion etched into his face. Pleasure. Real pleasure. My lord, he whispered. That's the best strawberry I've tasted since. He never finished the sentence. Since her mother. They both heard it anyway. Talia sat across from him quietly and handed him the corn. Look closer. Malcolm turned it slowly in his hands. Perfect kernels. Firm weight. No rot. His gaze lifted toward her. Where did this come from? Talia leaned forward slightly. Our land, Dad. The kitchen fell silent. Outside, wind moved gently through the fields that had nearly died. Malcolm stared at her for a long time. Then finally. How? Chapter 3. The Purchase of Ruin. The secret did not stay small. It spread quietly at first. A few neighboring farmers noticed the Moretti crops recovering faster than expected. Then they noticed the color of the tomatoes, the size of the strawberries, the way Malcolm Moretti, half blind and tired to the bone, suddenly started standing a little straighter during market days. People asked questions. Talia answered almost none of them. She had already learned something important. The world laughed at strange ideas right until money started growing from them. Then suddenly everybody claimed they believed from the beginning. So she kept working. The patch behind the barn expanded into several acres. Her notebooks multiplied until stacks of them filled shelves in her room. Temperatures, moisture levels, carbon ratios, crop yield comparisons. Talia documented everything like a woman preparing for war. Because she was. She just hadn't chosen the battlefield yet. By 18, while her classmates spent afternoons talking about universities and dorm rooms and cities far away from Texas dust, Talia sat in the library studying land ownership records beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Mrs. Alvarez slid another folder toward her one evening. You're chasing something, the older woman observed. Talia barely looked up from the paperwork. I'm chasing opportunity. Mrs. Alvarez smiled faintly. That usually means trouble. Talia finally glanced up then, gray eyes sharp beneath the brim of her cap. Good. Outside, rain hammered softly against the library windows. Inside, Talia found the name. The adjacent dumping land belonged to a shell company tied to Grayscale Hospitality, but buried beneath legal filings and unpaid county taxes sat the real owner, an aging ranch investor named Walter Hensley. And Walter Hensley wanted out. The lawsuits had started piling up after environmental inspectors finally intervened. Cleanup costs soared. Grayscale backed away the second the dumping stopped being profitable, leaving the land poisoned, unstable, and nearly worthless on paper. Worthless to everyone except Talia Moretti. The moment she realized that, her pulse started pounding hard enough to hurt. Brown gold. Not waste. Inventory. Potential. Empire. That night she spread maps across the kitchen table while Malcolm listened quietly from his chair. They don't understand what they're sitting on, Talia said, voice tight with excitement. Dad, the volume alone. She pointed toward the figures she'd calculated by hand. If I process even half of it properly, we could supply farms across 3 counties. Malcolm studied her silently. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and old wood smoke. Rain tapped against the windows while the farmhouse settled around them in tired creaks. You're serious, he murmured. Talia looked up. I've never been more serious in my life. He leaned back slowly, weathered fingers rubbing across his jaw. The land cost money we don't have. I know. And equipment costs more. I know. And banks don't exactly throw cash at girls with dirt on their boots. Talia smiled slightly. Then we make them regret it later. That earned a tired laugh from him. God, she missed hearing that sound. Malcolm reached for his coffee cup carefully, his failing vision forcing him to move slower these days. When your mother died, he said quietly, I thought this place would bury us eventually. Talia stilled. He rarely spoke about Elena Moretti directly. Malcolm looked toward the dark window, though Talia doubted he could see much beyond his own reflection anymore. But you, his voice roughened slightly. You took rot and made something grow from it. Talia swallowed hard. Then Malcolm looked toward her again. Buy the damn land, Tal. The auction happened 2 months later. Talia wore her cleanest jeans and one of Malcolm's old belt buckles polished until it gleamed silver beneath the courthouse lights. Most people in attendance ignored her. That suited her just fine. Old ranchers muttered among themselves while county officials shuffled papers with the exhausted boredom of people who had long ago stopped caring what happened to damaged land. Walter Hensley barely glanced at her when she approached. You here with your daddy? He asked. Talia extended her paperwork calmly. No, sir. I'm here to buy your problem. That got his attention. 3 hours later, Talia Moretti walked out owning nearly 200 acres of poisoned earth. The land cost less than a decent pickup truck. Nobody else wanted it, which made her smile all the way home. The celebration lasted exactly one night. The next morning reality arrived swinging. The first 3 years nearly broke her. There was no montage, no sudden miracle, no cinematic leap into success. There was only work. Relentless. Grinding. Merciless work. Talia hired 2 laborers initially. One quit within a week because of the smell. The other stayed only because Talia paid cash and never complained beside him. The old barn became a processing station. Then another structure went up. Then 3 more. Talia learned welding from YouTube videos and stubbornness. She repaired broken machinery herself because contractors cost too much. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. Some weeks she forgot what day it was. Summer heat blistered her shoulders raw. Winters froze waterline solid. One piece of equipment exploded during processing and nearly burned down half the operation. Talia put the fire out herself with a garden hose and a shovel. Then went back to work. By 22, the land had transformed. Long rows of structured composting systems stretched across the property. Fresh steel buildings rose where dumping heaps once rotted beneath the sun. The smell had changed too. No longer decay. Now the air smelled rich. Earthy. Alive. Farmers started coming from neighboring counties. Then bigger farms. Then agricultural suppliers. Every customer returned. The crops grown from Talia's compost yielded stronger harvests with less water use, better root systems, healthier growth. Word spread. Money finally followed. But growth demanded machinery. Industrial machinery. And machinery demanded capital Talia still didn't have. One evening she stood in the kitchen while Malcolm sat hunched at the table, wrapped in a blanket despite the Texas heat. His left eye had clouded over completely now. The right wasn't much better. Talia hated how carefully he reached for things these days. Dad, she said quietly, we need 50,000. Malcolm didn't even flinch. 4. Screening systems. Loaders. Processing drums. Excitement flickered beneath her exhaustion. If we automate the next phase, production triples. Malcolm nodded slowly. Talia stepped closer. I can make a deal with Caldwell. That finally earned a reaction. Malcolm's brow furrowed. The gray bull. She nodded once. Caldwell had been circling for months trying to buy Malcolm's prize breeding bull. The animal was legendary locally. Massive shoulders. Excellent bloodline. The kind of livestock ranchers built reputations around. Malcolm had always refused. Until now. Silence stretched through the kitchen. Talia watched emotion move quietly across her father's face. Not hesitation. Memory. That bowl represented years of work. Years he once believed would fund Talia's university future. A future she never wanted. Finally, Malcolm reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The skin felt thinner than she remembered. "You already built your future," he said softly. Talia's throat tightened. Malcolm smiled faintly. "Sell him the bowl." The deal closed the following morning. Caldwell tried pushing for the calf too. Talia let him think he was winning. She shifted her Stetson between her hands, pretending uncertainty while mentally calculating exactly how much leverage she still held. "You drive a hard bargain, Caldwell," she sighed finally. The old rancher grinned. "Business ain't church, girl." Talia shook his hand. $70,000. Enough to change everything. She drove home beneath a burning Texas sunset with dust spiraling behind her truck and something fierce unfolding in her chest. Not hope. Something larger. Momentum. And somewhere deep beneath the roar of ambition, Talia could almost feel the land breathing beside her. Chapter 4. The Grayscale Woman. 10 years later, the land no longer smelled like death. Talia stood outside processing Barn 7 with her hands buried in the pockets of her work jacket and watched dusk spill molten gold across the property. The transformation still startled her sometimes. Where mountains of waste once baked beneath the Texas sun, sleek industrial buildings now stretched across the horizon in clean architectural lines of steel and glass. Conveyor systems hummed steadily in the distance. Blue operational lights glowed softly through high windows as night crews moved between stations. Trucks rolled in constantly now. Hotels, restaurants, agricultural suppliers, entire city waste programs. Grayscale Hospitality remained her largest supplier. Talia allowed herself a small, private irony in that. The empire that poisoned her land now paid her millions to clean up after them. Poetic justice smelled a lot like fresh soil and quarterly profit. Wind shifted gently through the property. Talia inhaled deeply. Rich earth. Rain trapped somewhere far off. The metallic scent of machinery cooling after a long day. Home. Her gaze drifted toward the original patch behind the old barn. She kept it untouched. 3 rows. Tomatoes. Corn. Strawberries. A shrine disguised as a garden. The farmhouse still stood too, though Talia had renovated most of it after Malcolm passed 5 years earlier. Some nights she still expected to hear his chair creak in the lounge. Still expected his voice drifting through the kitchen. Land remembers who loved it proper. The thought tightened something quietly inside her chest. Talia lowered her head briefly. "Your sacrifice wasn't wasted, Dad," she murmured into the evening air. "Not one damn piece of it." Then she heard it. A low engine growl cutting through the peaceful rhythm of the property. Talia sighed before she even turned around. A red Maserati came flying up the gravel road far too fast, dust exploding behind it in violent clouds. The vehicle gleamed beneath the setting sun like an expensive sin. Talia already knew who it was. Franklin Grayscale. Youngest son of the Grayscale dynasty. Boardroom prince. Professional idiot. He visited every few months trying to convince her to partner exclusively with Grayscale's sustainability division. Franklin treated composting like an amusing novelty despite the fact Talia's company now quietly outperformed several of Grayscale's own subsidiaries. Talia disliked him on principle. The Maserati slid to a stop near Barn 7. Dust rolled across the property slowly. Talia stepped forward with all the enthusiasm of a woman approaching a migraine. The driver's side door opened. A pair of bare legs appeared. Talia stopped walking. For one strange suspended second, her brain simply refused to continue functioning properly. A woman unfolded herself from the Maserati gracefully, one hand steadying against the roof while the other held a pair of nude heels dangling carelessly from elegant fingers. Barefoot. On gravel. Talia's eyes dropped instinctively. Pink-painted toes pressed against Texas dust. Long legs. Cream silk blouse tucked into a charcoal pencil skirt that absolutely did not belong anywhere near a compost facility. And yet somehow, she fit the scene perfectly. The woman shut the car door gently and lifted her gaze. Ice blue eyes collided with Talia's. The world tilted. Not dramatically. Not thunder and lightning. Worse. Subtle enough to feel dangerous. Blonde hair had been pinned into a loose messy knot that looked accidental in the deliberate way wealthy women mastered. Several strands escaped around sharp cheekbones softened slightly by the heat. Beautiful wasn't the right word. Beautiful implied softness. This woman looked expensive enough to start wars over. Talia became suddenly aware of herself. Work boots dusted in dirt. Black thermal shirt rolled to her elbows. Grease smudged near one wrist. The stranger's gaze moved over her slowly. Not dismissive. Interested. That somehow made it infinitely worse. The woman started walking toward her across the gravel, heels swinging lightly from one hand. No hesitation. No discomfort. Like she'd spent her entire life barefoot on Texas roads instead of stepping out of luxury sports cars. Talia's pulse betrayed her immediately. By the time the woman stopped in front of her, Talia could smell expensive perfume beneath the dry heat and dust. Something clean and cold with floral notes hiding beneath it. The stranger smiled slightly. It happened slowly. Like she knew exactly what her face did to people. "Miss Moretti," she drawled softly. Her voice wrapped itself around Talia's spine. Low. Smooth. Dangerously amused. "I hope I'm not intruding." Talia opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Jesus Christ. She cleared her throat hard enough to hurt. "And you are?" The woman glanced briefly past Talia toward the processing buildings glowing blue against the darkening land. Her expression changed then. Just slightly. Something thoughtful moved beneath the flirtation. Almost impressed. When she looked back at Talia, her voice dropped lower. Serena Grayscale. The name hit like a hammer against old scars. Talia's posture sharpened instantly. Grayscale. Of course. Of fucking course. Serena extended her hand calmly. Talia looked at it for half a second too long. Long fingers. Pale skin. A thin silver ring catching sunset light. Finally, Talia reached forward. The second their hands touched, heat sparked violently up her arm. Not metaphorically. Actual physical heat. Talia jerked back almost immediately, boots scraping against gravel as she stepped away too fast. Smooth, Moretti. Very smooth. Serena noticed. The slight curve of her mouth made that painfully obvious. Talia recovered as much dignity as possible and folded her arms across her chest. What can I do for you, Miss Grayscale? Serena tilted her head slightly. A breeze lifted loose strands of blonde hair around her face. Then she smiled again. This one sharper. More dangerous. Well, Serena said softly, eyes holding Talia's with terrifying steadiness, that depends entirely on whether you'd prefer honesty or business. Chapter 5. The woman they sent instead. Talia had dealt with enough wealthy people to recognize danger when it smiled at her. Serena Grayscale smiled like a woman carrying matches into a dry forest. The evening wind shifted between them, carrying the distant hum of machinery and the scent of fresh compost from the processing barns. Somewhere deeper on the property, hydraulic systems hissed as night crews continued loading screen soil into transport trucks. Neither woman moved. Talia folded her arms tighter across her chest. Business, she answered finally. Serena's smile deepened slightly. Smart choice. I've found honesty usually comes with invoices. That earned the first genuine flicker of amusement from Serena. Interesting. Not polished corporate laughter. Not fake boardroom charm. Real amusement. It transformed her face briefly into something younger and infinitely more dangerous. Talia already hated that she noticed. Serena glanced around the property slowly, taking in the scale of the operation. You've built something extraordinary here. Talia shrugged. I built survival. No, Serena looked back at her directly. You built leverage. The answer landed sharper than Talia expected. Most investors saw profits. Most competitors saw expansion. Most executives saw opportunity. Serena saw power. Talia felt caution tighten quietly inside her chest. The grayscale woman stepped closer to the railing beside Barn 7 and rested her palms against the steel. You know Franklin's been trying to negotiate a partnership. Negotiate? Talia snorted softly. That's a generous word for whatever the hell he's been doing. Serena laughed under her breath. Talia immediately wanted to hear the sound again, which was deeply unfortunate. He proposed a rooftop wellness compost spa last month, Talia continued dryly. I nearly had him escorted off the property. He told the board you lacked vision. Talia barked out a laugh. Your brother wears loafers without socks and calls himself a disruptor. Serena looked down briefly, lips pressing together like she was actively fighting a smile. You're not wrong. Silence stretched comfortably for a moment. Too comfortably. That bothered Talia more than hostility would have. The blue operational lights reflected softly against Serena's silk blouse, while dusk settled deeper across the property. She looked wildly out of place beside steel barns and gravel roads. And yet she stood there like she belonged. Talia disliked how much that unsettled her. Finally, Serena straightened. The board sent me because Franklin failed. There it was. The real conversation. Talia's expression cooled instantly. And what exactly are they hoping you'll accomplish? Serena's gaze lingered on her for one unreadable second too long. Acquisition. Talia laughed immediately. Not nervous laughter. Sharp laughter. Disbelieving. No. You haven't heard the offer. I don't need to. It's substantial. So am I. That answer visibly pleased Serena. Interesting again. Most corporate negotiators became irritated by resistance. Serena looked energized by it. The board believes integrating Moretti Organics into grayscale sustainability would be mutually beneficial, Serena said smoothly. Talia leaned against the railing beside her. Translation. You become very wealthy. Talia turned slowly. Serena. The name rolled lower now, roughened by warning. I became wealthy the second your family stopped poisoning my land for free. For the first time since arriving, Serena lost a fraction of composure. Not much. Just enough for Talia to notice. Good. Let her feel it. Talia stepped closer now, voice quieter. You know what Grayscale did here? Serena held her gaze steadily. Yes. My father went blind while your company dumped chemical runoff beside our crops. A shadow moved behind Serena's eyes. Talia kept going. We lost harvests. Water. Years. Her jaw tightened. And now your board wants to buy the result? Serena didn't interrupt. Didn't defend the company. Didn't offer rehearsed sympathy. That alone separated her from every executive Talia had ever met. Finally, Serena spoke carefully. I didn't come here to insult what you built. Then why are you here? The question hung between them. A truck rumbled somewhere in the distance. Wind moved softly through the open fields. Serena looked out across the property again. When she answered, her voice was quieter than before. Because the board is scared of you. Talia blinked once. That was not the answer she expected. Serena continued. You turned environmental catastrophe into a billion-dollar enterprise without investors, without corporate infrastructure, without political backing. Her eyes slid toward Talia again. Do you have any idea how threatening that is to people like my family? Talia stared at her carefully now. This woman was either extremely honest or extraordinarily dangerous. Possibly both. And what do you think? Talia asked softly. Serena went still. For a moment the mask slipped completely. Not the polished executive. Not the grayscale daughter. Just Serena. Beautiful. Tired. Hungry in some way Talia didn't yet understand. Then the mask returned. I think, Serena said slowly, that my family has spent decades mistaking ownership for intelligence. That sentence hit the ground like gasoline near open flame. Talia's pulse shifted. Because now this wasn't just negotiation anymore. Now it was rebellion. Serena looked toward the original farmhouse visible in the distance. The board thinks I'm here to soften you up before acquisition talks. Talia crossed her arms again. And are you? Serena met her gaze fully. No. Too immediate. Too real. Something electric moved through the silence after that. Talia suddenly became very aware of how close Serena was standing. Close enough to smell her perfume again beneath the dust and earth. Close enough to notice the faint gold flecks hidden inside ice blue eyes. Close enough to realize Serena was looking at her mouth. Jesus. Talia stepped backward instinctively. Professional. Stay professional. So if you're not here for acquisition, Talia said carefully, what's your agenda, Miss Grayscale? The corner of Serena's mouth lifted slowly. There she is. What? The woman everyone warned me about. Talia narrowed her eyes. And what exactly did they warn you about? Serena leaned one hip lightly against the steel railing. That you're intelligent enough to terrify investors. A pause. And stubborn enough to survive anything. Talia snorted softly. Your board talks too much. They're nervous. Serena's smile sharpened. You built an empire out of their mistakes. The words settled warm and dangerous between them. Then Serena reached into her handbag and pulled out a thin black folder. Business again. Talia almost regretted it. Serena held the folder out calmly. Talia took it carefully. Inside were environmental reports. Old reports. Grayscale reports. Talia's stomach tightened instantly. Dates. Contamination studies. Internal warnings. All buried. All hidden. Her eyes lifted slowly toward Serena. What is this? Serena's expression lost all traces of flirtation. This, she said quietly, is why I'm really here. Chapter 6. Inherited damage. Talia did not open the folder immediately. She flipped the first page. Chemical runoff projections. Water contamination concerns. Crop exposure risks. Then another page. Internal complaints. Suppressed inspections. Financial projections calculating whether lawsuits would cost less than proper disposal compliance. Talia felt cold fury begin curling slowly through her bloodstream. The documents trembled slightly in her grip. Not fear. Rage. All these years. Her father losing his sight. Their crops dying. Their debts. The exhaustion. The humiliation. Calculated. Talia looked up sharply. You knew. Serena didn't look away. Yes. How long? The answer took too long. Too damn long. Since law school. Talia laughed once. The sound came out ugly. Law school. She shook her head slowly. Jesus Christ. Serena remained still against the railing, but Talia noticed her fingers tightening slightly around the pair of heels she still carried. Good. She should feel uncomfortable. Talia stepped closer. So what? She demanded quietly. You woke up guilty one morning? Serena's jaw shifted once. My grandfather built Grayscale Hospitality. Talia said nothing. My father expanded it. A beat. And Franklin thinks sustainability is a branding strategy. The disgust in Serena's voice arrived fast and sharp before she smoothed it away again. Talia crossed her arms tightly. And you? For the first time since arriving, Serena looked tired. Not physically. Soul tired. The family business teaches you very early that morality becomes flexible when enough money enters the room. Wind moved softly across the property. Talia remembered another night years ago. Her father standing beside the poison fence line beneath dying crops while trucks dumped waste under moonlight. They'll ruin this land. She looked back at Serena. Your family already proved that. The words hit cleanly. Serena accepted them without flinching. Interesting. Most wealthy people defended themselves instinctively. They twisted language until accountability became smoke. Serena just stood there and absorbed the blow. Talia hated how much that unsettled her. She looked back down at the documents. There were signatures everywhere. Executives, consultants, lawyers. Grayscale knew exactly what they were doing, and buried it anyway. Then Talia reached the final pages. Her pulse slowed. What is this? Serena's expression hardened slightly. The board's current plan. Talia scanned the paperwork faster now. Projected acquisitions. Regional sustainability monopolies. Waste processing ownership expansion. And there it was. Moretti Organics. Highlighted. Talia's stomach turned. Acquisition through forced regulatory pressure. Her eyes narrowed. You're trying to bury me. Not me. The board. Yes. Talia looked up sharply. Serena stepped forward now, finally closing the remaining distance between them. They've spent the last 18 months lobbying for state environmental restructuring. Her voice lowered. If the legislation passes, independent processors lose distribution autonomy. Talia understood immediately. Of course she did. The state would suddenly require centralized compliance partnerships, corporate partnerships, grayscale partnerships. The acquisition wasn't a proposal. It was a siege. Talia's anger sharpened into something colder. They created the contamination, she said quietly, then positioned themselves to own the cleanup. Serena nodded once. That's how dynasties survive. Jesus Christ. Talia looked out across her property. Her land. Her workers. Her father's legacy. All circling beneath vultures in tailored suits. You said the board is scared of me, Talia murmured. They are. Good. The single word came out hard enough to cut steel. Serena watched her carefully then. Not flirtation now. Not amusement. Assessment. Like she was watching Talia become something larger in real time. You're taking this remarkably well, Serena observed quietly. Talia laughed softly. No, Serena. She closed the folder. I'm taking this personally. That did something to Serena. Talia saw it happen. A subtle shift behind her eyes. A flash of heat. Recognition. Because Serena understood ambition. Understood fury. Understood what it meant to inherit a battlefield disguised as a family business. Dangerous woman, Talia thought. Dangerous in all the worst ways. Why give me this? Talia asked finally. Serena was silent for a moment. Then, because I'm tired. Talia frowned slightly. Tired of what? A humorless smile touched Serena's mouth. Watching old men destroy things so they can feel immortal. The answer landed heavy between them. Talia studied her carefully now. The expensive clothes. The Maserati. The careful composure. But underneath it all, exhaustion. Not weakness. No. Serena Grayscale looked like a woman who had spent years sharpening herself into something useful for other people's wars. Talia recognized that kind of loneliness instantly. Which was unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Serena glanced toward the farmhouse in the distance. You know the strangest part? Talia stayed quiet. My family still thinks they're the heroes. Talia barked out a dark laugh. Every empire does. Their eyes met again. And suddenly the air changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Talia became acutely aware of how close Serena stood beneath the blue operational lights. Dust still clung faintly to Serena's bare feet. One loose strand of blonde hair moved gently in the wind beside her cheek. Beautiful. Talia immediately resented the word. Serena noticed her looking. Of course she did. You keep staring at my feet, Serena said softly. Talia nearly choked on air. I am absolutely not. A slow smile curved Serena's mouth. You absolutely are. Talia recovered quickly. Well, she drawled, they're unusual. Bare feet. On this property? Talia glanced pointedly toward the gravel. That's either confidence or insanity. Serena stepped closer again. Maybe both. The space between them tightened instantly. Talia's pulse betrayed her in spectacular fashion. Jesus. Serena tilted her head slightly. You know, she murmured, most people spend meetings with me staring at my last name. Talia held her gaze. I noticed your last name. And? Talia's eyes dropped briefly. Pink-painted toes against Texas dust. Then back up slowly. It wasn't the first thing I noticed. Silence. Heavy. Electric. Terrible. Serena's breath caught so faintly Talia almost missed it. Almost. Then headlights swept suddenly across the yard. Both women turned instinctively. A black SUV was approaching fast down the gravel road. Serena's entire posture changed. Gone was the warmth. Gone was the dangerous flirtation. In its place stood something colder. Controlled. Talia noticed immediately. Who's that? Serena's expression hardened. That, she said quietly, is probably the reason this conversation just became dangerous. Chapter 7. The Men in Black SUVs. The black SUV did not slow down. It tore up the gravel road like it owned the land beneath it, headlights slicing across processing barns and steel structures, while dust spiraled violently behind the vehicle. Talia immediately hated it. Not the SUV itself. What it represented. Power arriving uninvited. The vehicle stopped hard beside Serena's Maserati. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then the passenger door opened. A man stepped out first. Mid-50s. Tailored charcoal suit. Silver haircut with military precision. Not Texas rich. Corporate rich. The kind that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and legal immunity. Talia recognized the type instantly. He scanned the property once before his attention landed on Serena. Displeasure darkened his expression immediately. Well, he said coolly, this explains the GPS issue. Serena's face became unreadable. Not guarded. Weaponized. Talia watched the transformation carefully. Interesting. The warm, dangerous woman from moments ago vanished behind something colder and infinitely sharper. The driver's side opened next. Franklin Grayscale emerged wearing loafers without socks. Talia closed her eyes briefly. Of course he did. Franklin brushed imaginary dust from his designer jacket before spotting Talia near the railing. Miss Moretti, he called with entirely too much enthusiasm. Wonderful property. Still smells agricultural. Talia stared at him. You drove 2 hours to insult dirt? Franklin blinked. The older man beside him hid what looked suspiciously like amusement. Serena pinched the bridge of her nose. Yes, she muttered softly. That sounds like Franklin. Talia nearly smiled. Nearly. Franklin approached with the confidence of a man who had never once been punched despite deeply deserving it. Talia suspected the universe was simply procrastinating. Talia, Franklin continued smoothly, I wasn't aware my sister had arranged a private meeting. You weren't supposed to be aware, Serena replied flatly. There it was again. The shift. Talia looked toward Serena carefully now. This wasn't sibling irritation. This was war disguised as family. The silver-haired man stepped forward calmly. Miss Moretti. His voice carried polished authority. Daniel Ashford. Grayscale Legal Counsel. Talia didn't offer her hand. A lawyer. She nodded slowly. Now the evening feels complete. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Approval maybe. Or caution. People underestimated Talia constantly until she opened her mouth. Then they started recalculating. Franklin looked around the property again. I must say, he sighed dramatically, it's impressive what you've done with all this. He gestured vaguely toward the barns. Organic decay chic. Talia stared at him long enough to make him uncomfortable. It's compost, Franklin, she said finally. Not a rooftop cocktail lounge. Daniel coughed suddenly into his fist. Franklin frowned. Serena looked dangerously close to smiling. Good. Let him squirm. Talia folded her arms. So, she said coolly, which one of you tracked her? Franklin answered immediately. She ignored 6 calls. Serena turned slowly. You installed tracking on my vehicle? Franklin's confidence faltered slightly. It's a company car. You bugged my car? Technically security did. Talia's expression darkened instantly. Control. That explains Serena's exhaustion better than any confession could. Daniel stepped smoothly between the siblings before the argument escalated. We're here because the board became concerned. Serena laughed once. Cold. Concerned, she repeated. Daniel remained composed. You disappeared during active acquisition discussions. Talia's gaze sharpened. Acquisition. There it was again. Always circling back like vultures. Franklin finally noticed the black folder in Talia's hand. His expression changed immediately. Fast enough to matter. What's that? Nobody answered. Franklin looked toward Serena slowly. Then realization hit. Color drained slightly from his face. You didn't. Serena met his stare evenly. I did. The air shifted. Talia felt it physically. Whatever lived inside that folder was far more explosive than even she realized. Franklin stepped forward sharply. Serena, are you out of your damn mind? She deserved the truth. She's competition. Talia's jaw tightened. Serena's voice turned razor sharp. She's a person. Silence cracked across the yard. Franklin blinked first. Interesting. Very interesting. Talia watched Serena differently after that. Not because of the words. Because of how instinctively they came out. Like Serena had spent years choking on everyone else's cruelty. Daniel exhaled slowly. This is precisely why your father didn't want you handling negotiations emotionally. Talia saw it happen instantly. That word. Emotionally. A tiny fracture beneath Serena's composure. Not weakness. Humiliation. Old humiliation. Talia hated it immediately. Careful, counselor, Talia said quietly. You're starting to sound threatened. Daniel's attention shifted toward her. I'm sounding practical. No, Talia replied. Practical men don't arrive in black SUVs after dark because a woman had one unsupervised meeting. Franklin scoffed. You think this is about supervision? Talia looked at him. I think men like you panic when women stop behaving predictably. Franklin opened his mouth. Closed it. Daniel intervened again before his ego collapsed entirely. Miss Moretti, the board simply wishes to maintain productive negotiations. Talia lifted the folder slightly. Is that what we're calling environmental cover-ups now? That landed. Hard. Daniel's expression cooled by several degrees. Serena, he said carefully, you've compromised confidential material. No, Serena replied softly. Grayscale did that years ago. Talia looked between them slowly. Puzzle pieces sliding together. This wasn't just corporate conflict. This was Serena detonating something from inside the dynasty itself. Franklin rubbed a hand through his hair. You cannot seriously be doing this over compost. Talia smiled then. Slowly. Dangerously. Franklin, she said softly, your family built hotels. She stepped closer. I built leverage. The words hit him harder than Talia expected. Because suddenly he understood. This wasn't some farmer they could absorb quietly anymore. Talia Moretti had become infrastructure. And infrastructure was power. Daniel clearly understood it too. His gaze moved across the operational buildings glowing behind Talia. Calculating. Assessing. Threat levels. Your company is growing aggressively, he observed. Talia smiled slightly. So is your concern. Wind swept across the yard. Dust moved around Serena's bare feet while tension thickened beneath the blue industrial lights. Then Franklin sighed dramatically. Honestly, Serena, what exactly is your endgame here? Serena looked at Talia. Not briefly. Not accidentally. Directly. The silence stretched just a fraction too long. Talia felt heat crawl slowly up her spine. Daniel noticed. Of course the lawyer noticed. So did Franklin. And suddenly the entire atmosphere shifted into something sharper. More dangerous. Serena finally answered without looking away from Talia. I haven't decided yet. Chapter 8. This land has teeth. The silence after Serena's answer stretched sharp enough to draw blood. Texas night settled fully around them now. Blue operational lights glowed against steel barns while trucks moved steadily deeper in the property, their engines rumbling like distant thunder beneath the stars. Talia stood very still. Franklin looked uncomfortable. Daniel looked calculating. Serena looked, God help her, alive. Talia decided immediately that was a problem for another day. She shifted her attention toward the SUV instead. You know, she said calmly, most people call before entering private property. Franklin gave a careless shrug. It's not exactly Fort Knox. Talia smiled. Not warmly. The expression made Franklin straighten slightly. Franklin, she said softly, there are 6 ex-military security contractors on this land right now. The wind seemed to pause. Franklin blinked. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Talia continued casually. 3 trained dogs. Full perimeter cameras. Thermal systems on every processing building. A beat. And 2 men watching this conversation through rifle scopes. Franklin laughed nervously. Talia did not laugh with him. That was the moment he realized she wasn't joking. The color shifted slightly beneath his tan. Jesus, he muttered. Daniel glanced subtly toward the dark rooflines surrounding the property. Assessing. Smart man. Talia stepped closer. This operation processes millions annually, she said quietly. You think I built this without learning how to protect it? Serena watched her with unmistakable fascination now. Talia felt it like heat against her skin. Dangerous woman, she reminded herself again. Dangerous reaction. Franklin recovered poorly. There's no need to be dramatic. Talia tilted her head. You tracked your sister to my land after dark. Nobody answered. Talia's voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. You arrived unannounced in a vehicle with blacked-out windows. Another step forward. And your legal counsel started discussing acquisition pressure tactics on my property. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. There it is. Talia smiled faintly. I could have every one of you removed for trespassing right now. Franklin scoffed instinctively. Talia looked past him toward Barn 7. Mateo. A massive figure emerged from the shadows near the processing entrance, so silently Franklin physically startled. 6'4". Broad shoulders. Former military posture. The shepherd beside him looked capable of ending small wars independently. Franklin took one involuntary step backward. Talia almost enjoyed herself. Almost. Evening, boss, Mateo called calmly. Talia never broke eye contact with Franklin. Everything all right? Mateo's gaze swept over the gray scales once. Professional. Cold. Depends, he answered evenly. Franklin swallowed. Serena looked down briefly, hiding what was very obviously amusement. Daniel recovered first. We're leaving. Talia nodded once. Good choice. But now she turned toward Serena. And suddenly the atmosphere changed again. The others felt it immediately. That was the inconvenient part. because whatever lived between Talia and Serena now had become visible enough to alter the air itself. Talia hated that, mostly because she liked it. Serena stepped forward slowly, closer than necessary. Close enough for Talia to smell that cold floral perfume again beneath the scent of dust and warm machinery. "I apologize for this," Serena said quietly. Talia studied her face carefully. And there it was again beneath the composure. Fatigue. Not weakness. Just the exhaustion of someone constantly surrounded by men trying to own every room she entered. Talia understood that kind of loneliness more than she wanted to. "You don't control their behavior," Talia replied. A flicker crossed Serena's eyes. Surprise maybe. Most people probably blamed her automatically for the grayscale meme. Talia wasn't most people. Franklin made an impatient sound behind them. "Serena." Neither woman looked at him. Talia folded her arms. "If your board wants meetings," she said calmly, "they request them properly." Serena nodded once. "And if I want a meeting?" Talia's pulse betrayed her instantly. Damn it. The question wasn't business anymore. Not entirely. Talia held Serena's gaze carefully. "You come alone." The answer dropped between them heavy and electric. Serena went very still. Then slowly, she smiled. Not corporate. Not polished. Something softer. Sharper. Interested. It transformed her completely. Behind them, Franklin looked deeply alarmed. "Good." Serena glanced briefly around the property again. The glowing barns. The trucks. The sprawling empire built from rot and fury. When she looked back at Talia, admiration sat openly in her gaze now. "You know what your problem is, Miss Moretti?" Talia lifted an eyebrow. "I'm sure you're about to tell me." Serena stepped even closer. Bare feet against gravel. Silk against Texas wind. "You're far more dangerous than anyone warned me." Talia's heartbeat turned traitorous. "And you," she murmured, "arrived barefoot on hostile ground." Her eyes dropped briefly towards Serena's dust-covered feet before returning upward slowly. "Which means either you're brave." A pause. "Or you wanted my attention." The silence that followed could have ignited gasoline. Serena's breath caught faintly. Talia saw it. Felt victorious about it immediately. Then Serena leaned in just enough for her voice to brush against Talia's ear like warm smoke. "I'll come back," she said softly. Talia's spine tightened. "But next time." Serena pulled back slowly, blue eyes holding hers captive. "On your terms." Jesus Christ. Then Serena stepped away before Talia could recover properly. Professional composure snapped back into place with terrifying elegance. She turned toward the SUV. Franklin looked between the two women like he'd accidentally walked into a hostage negotiation fueled by sexual tension and corporate warfare. Honestly? Fair assessment. Daniel opened the rear passenger door for Serena silently. Before getting in, Serena paused once more and looked back toward Talia standing beneath the blue lights of her empire. Something unspoken moved between them again. Recognition. Challenge. Hunger. Then Serena disappeared into the SUV. The door shut. Engines roared. Talia stood motionless, while the vehicles disappeared down the long gravel road, red Maserati following behind black corporate armor, like a flame being escorted by shadows. Only once the lights vanished completely did Mateo approach her quietly. "You want us to dig into them?" Talia kept staring into the darkness. "Oh, we're absolutely digging." Mateo nodded once. Then, "The blonde one trouble?" Talia exhaled slowly through her nose. A dangerous smile touched the corner of her mouth. "The worst kind." Chapter 9. Paper Wolves. Morning arrived like nothing had happened. Texas had a talent for pretending. The land stretched out under pale sunlight, all golden fields and steel structures, as if the night before had not carried corporate ghosts and barefoot storms through its bones. But Talia remembered. The folder sat on her kitchen table. Still open. Still bleeding truth. Coffee steamed beside it, untouched. Talia stood in front of the window, watching trucks roll in for the early shift. Workers moved like clockwork across the yard. Familiar rhythm. Familiar control. Except now everything felt thinner. Like someone had quietly loosened the screws holding the world together. Mateo leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You didn't sleep," he observed. Talia didn't look away from the window. "I've slept on worse things than betrayal." That earned a low hum of agreement from him. After a moment, Mateo stepped closer. "We ran the plates on the SUVs." Talia finally turned. "And? Clean on paper." Talia let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course they are." Mateo hesitated. "But—" Talia raised an eyebrow. He continued carefully. "There's movement in their legal filings. Heavy restructuring across 3 subsidiaries. Offshore transfers. And," he paused, "aggressive acquisition positioning under environmental compliance legislation." Talia's jaw tightened. "So it's real." Mateo nodded once. "It's real." Silence settled again, heavier this time. Talia looked down at the folder. Grayscale had not just poisoned land. They had engineered recovery as a product category. A monopoly dressed as sustainability. Beautiful. She almost admired it. Almost. Then she flipped another page. Internal memo. Stamped confidential. Her eyes scanned quickly. And stopped. A sentence near the bottom. Target asset. Moretti Organics demonstrates atypical soil regeneration capacity. High-value intellectual property potential. Recommend acquisition or replication strategy. Talia's hand stilled. Replication. That word sat differently. Colder. More invasive. Not just buying her work. Copying it. Stripping it. Dismantling it. Her throat tightened slightly. Mateo noticed immediately. "What is it?" Talia didn't answer at first. Then quietly. "They don't just want to own it." Her fingers tightened on the page. "They want to erase me after they learn how it works." Mateo's expression darkened. "Copy then cut." Talia nodded once. Classic. She closed the folder slowly. Not shaking. Not panicking. Just very, very still. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Calmer. Sharpened. "Call legal." Mateo straightened slightly. "Which team?" "The one I hired for environmental compliance litigation." A pause. "And Mateo?" "Yes, boss." Talia turned from the window fully now. Her eyes were steady. Cold in a way that meant focus, not fear. "Pull every permit Grayscale has touched in this state for the last 15 years. Mateo nodded once. "Already on it." Talia almost smiled. "Good man." Then she walked past him into the hallway. "No more surprises," she added quietly. Mateo followed her with his eyes. "What about Serena Grayscale?" Talia paused. Just for a second. Then, "She didn't lie to me." Mateo frowned slightly. "That's your concern?" Talia glanced over her shoulder. "No," she said softly. "That's what makes her dangerous." Across the city, Serena Grayscale stood in a glass-walled office that did not feel like hers. It never had. The Grayscale headquarters sat like a polished monument to inherited certainty. Everything was expensive, symmetrical, controlled. Even the silence had money in it. Serena stared out over the skyline while Franklin paced behind her like a restless dog in designer shoes. "You gave her internal documents," he said again, voice tight. "Do you understand what that means legally?" Serena didn't turn. "Yes." Franklin stopped pacing. "Serena." Now she turned. Slowly. Her expression was composed again, but the softness from the night before had not fully left her eyes. "What?" she asked quietly. Franklin ran a hand through his hair. "The board is going to interpret this as sabotage." "It is sabotage." That stopped him. Even Daniel Ashford, seated near the conference table reviewing files, looked up slightly. Franklin blinked. You're admitting that? Serena walked toward the glass slowly. I didn't leak trade secrets. She stopped beside the window. I revealed liability. Daniel spoke carefully. To a competitor. Serena's gaze didn't shift. To the only person building something that fixes what we broke. Franklin scoffed. That's not how business works. Serena finally looked at him. And there it was again. That quiet exhaustion underneath her composure. No, she said softly. That's how you work. Silence sharpened. Franklin opened his mouth. Closed it again. Daniel leaned back slightly. You realize what the board will do now? Serena nodded once. Yes. They will isolate you. Yes. They will strip authority. Yes. They may remove you entirely from negotiations. Serena exhaled slowly. Yes. Franklin looked at her like she had lost her mind. Then why do it? That question lingered. Serena's eyes drifted briefly back toward the horizon. Far beyond glass and steel. Far beyond grayscale towers. She saw dust roads. Bare feet. Blue-lit barns. A woman standing in the middle of an empire built from soil and defiance. Then Serena spoke. Quietly. Because for once, she wasn't speaking to them. I wanted to see what she would do, she said. Franklin frowned. That's not an answer. Serena's mouth curved faintly. It is if you know her. Daniel closed the file in front of him slowly. You're not neutral in this anymore. Serena nodded. I never was. Franklin muttered something under his breath about corporate insanity. Serena ignored him. Because something else mattered more now. A return. She had promised it. And Talia Moretti did not strike her as a woman who tolerated empty words. Serena picked up her coat from the chair. Cancel my meetings tomorrow, she said. Daniel frowned. You're going back? Serena paused at the door. Then, without turning. Yes. Franklin exhaled sharply. To her. A beat. Serena smiled slightly. No, she said. Then corrected herself softly. Yes. And left them sitting in the polished bones of an empire that suddenly didn't feel as certain as it used to. Chapter 10. Paper Wolf's Silent Teeth. Talia did not sleep. The folder stayed open on the kitchen table like a mouth that refused to close. She had seen corruption before. Lived inside its weather. But this was architecture. Not accident. Not negligence. Design. Outside, the land worked through the night without her. Pumps cycled. Filters hummed. Trucks came and went under security lights that painted everything in sterile blue. Her empire never truly slept. Talia finally closed the folder. Not because the truth was finished. Because she was. For now, Serena Grayscale stood in a hotel suite that had no warmth in it. Glass, steel, silence. The kind of luxury that felt like being observed. Her phone sat face down on the table. She hadn't touched it in hours. She already knew what was coming. Franklin's outrage. The board's confusion. Daniel's careful phrasing of containment strategies. They would all think the same thing. Serena had gone soft. Serena had gotten distracted. Serena had stepped outside the rails. None of them would understand the simplest truth. She had not lost control. She had redirected it. Her eyes moved to the documents she had taken from the internal archive. Only a fragment. Not enough to expose everything. Just enough to open a door. Just enough to make Grayscale think she was still playing their game. And that was the point. Because the board did not fear rebellion. They anticipated it. They managed it. What they did not anticipate was misdirection. Serena exhaled slowly. Talia Moretti had not been part of the plan. Not even in the margins. She had been a routine visit. A pressure test. A quiet negotiation wrapped in corporate expectation. Franklin's failed charm offensive had created noise. Serena had been sent to smooth it. Contain it. Absorb it. Return it to structure. That was what they thought. That was what they always thought. But then she had stepped onto the land. And everything had stopped behaving correctly. 16. That was the age she left Grayscale the first time. Not because she was brave. Because she was done watching harm being called efficiency. Europe gave her law degrees like weapons wrapped in education. She learned contracts the way other people learned languages. She built a firm that made corporations nervous without raising its voice. Then she walked away from it. Quietly. Cleanly. Because she had started recognizing the same patterns everywhere. Different countries. Different victims. Same signature beneath it all. Grayscale. Always Grayscale. So she returned. Not as a daughter. As an internal fracture. A controlled presence inside a system she already intended to disrupt. They thought she came back to stabilize the brand. To guide Franklin. To protect legacy. They were wrong. Serena opened her eyes. Talia Moretti had simply accelerated everything. Back in Texas, Talia stood in the barn doorway watching Dawn push gold light across the processing fields. Mateo approached behind her, boots quiet on gravel. "You've been up all night," he said. Talia didn't turn. "So have the machines." A pause. Then, "You want the legal team to escalate?" Talia shook her head once. "No." Mateo frowned slightly. "The documents you found are just the beginning," Talia cut in. Finally she turned. Her expression was steady. Not shaken. Not reactive. Focused. "That wasn't an accident," she said quietly. "It was a breadcrumb." Mateo studied her. "For what?" Talia looked out across her land. Across what she had built from ruin and refusal. "To see who follows it." Serena arrived at Grayscale headquarters later that day. Franklin was waiting. Angry already. Predictable. Daniel stood slightly behind him, composed but alert. "You gave Moretti internal documentation." Franklin snapped the moment she stepped into the corridor. "Do you understand how that looks?" Serena didn't slow her pace. "I understand exactly how it looks. That wasn't approved. It didn't need approval." Franklin stepped closer. "You're acting independently." Serena finally stopped walking. Turned. Her gaze settled on him like a blade laid gently against skin. "I am acting strategically," she corrected. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then explain the strategy." Serena held their attention for a beat too long. Just long enough for discomfort to settle. "I tested her," she said simply. Franklin scoffed. "With internal risk documents?" Serena tilted her head slightly. If she reacted impulsively, she would have exposed herself. Daniel frowned. "And instead?" A pause. Serena's voice softened slightly. "Instead, she understood everything in under 20 minutes. Silence. Franklin's irritation faltered. Daniel's calculation sharpened. Serena continued. "That tells us what we're dealing with." Franklin crossed his arms. "And what exactly are we dealing with?" Serena looked past them both. Through glass. Through structure. Through everything Grayscale believed was stable. "A system that didn't stay contained," she said quietly. Then she added, almost casually, "And a woman who built something we underestimated." Franklin frowned. "That sounds like admiration." Serena's mouth curved faintly. "It is assessment." Daniel studied her carefully. "And the second document?" Serena's expression did not change. Just enough to keep her interested. Franklin narrowed his eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game." Serena finally looked back at him. "No," she said softly. "I'm playing theirs." A beat. Then she walked past them. Because the truth was simple, even if none of them wanted to see it yet. The file she had shown Talia was not an ending. It was a trigger. A first knock on a sealed door. And Serena Grayscale intended to be the one standing there when it opened fully. Chapter 11. The Return Without Permission. Talia did not chase ghosts. That was her rule. Problems came to her land. She didn't go looking for them. So when Serena Grayscale did not return with lawyers, contracts, or corporate pressure, Talia noticed and did nothing about it. At first, the days settled back into rhythm. Machines hummed. Soil cooled. Trucks came and left in steady cycles like breathing lungs. Talia buried herself in work the way she always did when something tried to take up too much space in her mind. Expansion plans. Yield reports. New filtration systems. Her empire did not run itself. It obeyed her. Mostly. But there were moments, small ones, when her attention drifted without permission. The memory of ice blue eyes under industrial light. Bare feet on gravel like she belonged to the earth instead of the glass towers that made her name. Talia hated how often that image returned. Hated it more that it didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like recognition trying to become memory. She refused to name it. Naming things gave them power. Serena did not arrive in a Maserati this time. She arrived in a rental truck. Dust on the tires. No escort. No Franklin. Just her. She parked at the edge of the property near Barn 7 and stepped out slowly. No silk blouse today. No corporate armor. Simple shirt. Jeans. Hair tied back in a loose knot that looked like it had been done without strategy. Still Serena. Still dangerous. Just quieter. Mateo spotted her first. He did not raise his weapon. But he did shift his weight. A warning without words. Serena lifted her hands slightly. Not here for business, she called calmly. Mateo didn't move. Boss doesn't like surprises. A pause. Serena nodded once. Neither do I. That earned a short, skeptical look from him. He turned slightly and spoke into his radio. A beat later, Talia's voice came through. Low. Controlled. Let her in. Mateo hesitated. You sure? Silence. Then, let her in. Talia did not look up from the screen when Serena entered the office. She kept typing. Deliberately. Not avoidance. Control. Serena stopped a few steps inside. Didn't speak immediately. Just observed. The office was not decorative. Nothing in it existed for comfort. It was functional in the way storms are functional. Maps on one wall. Yield projections on another. Stacks of reports tied together with worn clips. And Talia, in the center of it all like gravity, had chosen a single point of focus. Finally, Talia spoke. Franklin didn't come with you. Serena answered carefully. He wasn't invited. A pause. Talia finally looked up. Just once. It was enough. The air shifted immediately. Not attraction first. Recognition. That same strange fracture neither of them had named out loud. Talia leaned back slightly in her chair. You're not here for contracts. Serena shook her head once. No. You're not here for acquisition. Another shake. No. Talia studied her for a long moment. Then you're wasting my time. Serena's mouth almost curved. Almost. I'm here to understand you. That landed differently. Talia didn't react immediately, which was, in itself, a reaction. She stood slowly, walked around the desk. Not rushing, not retreating either. Just closing distance the way a decision closes distance. You already understand the file, Talia said quietly. Serena met her gaze. That was paperwork. Talia stopped. People or not? A flicker. Serena didn't answer immediately. Then, no, she said softly. People or not. Silence expanded between them. Outside, machines continued their endless work. Inside, something far less stable was happening. Talia crossed her arms. You don't get to come here after showing me a blade and call it curiosity. Serena nodded once. I know. That honesty again. That refusal to dress things up. It made Talia more cautious, not less. Why no? Talia asked. Serena's gaze did not waver. Because I left and came back as someone who is supposed to understand systems. A pause. And I don't understand yours. Talia almost laughed. Coldly. You think I'm a system? Serena stepped closer. No, she said. I think you're what happens when systems fail to contain something alive. That sentence shifted something subtle in Talia's expression. Not softness. Attention. Serena noticed. Of course she did. Talia turned away slightly, walking back toward the desk. You're dangerous, she said quietly. Serena replied without hesitation. So are you. That made Talia stop again. Slowly look back. There it was. No flinch. No denial. No corporate performance. Just truth sitting between them like a third presence. Talia exhaled once through her nose. You don't trust me, Serena added. Talia's answer came immediately. No. A beat. Then, quieter. I don't trust anyone who shows up with half the truth and calls it honesty. Serena accepted that without argument. Then she surprised her. Fair. That single word did something inconvenient to Talia's focus. Because people like Serena Grayscale did not usually yield space. They occupied it. Talia studied her more carefully now. You left Grayscale, she said. Serena nodded. At 16. Talia's expression tightened slightly. That's not a coincidence. No, Serena agreed. It isn't. Another pause. I built a firm in Europe, Serena continued. Spent years representing environmental cases. Illegal dumping. Corporate negligence. Talia's eyes sharpened. And then, I left that too. Why? Serena's gaze softened fractionally. Because I realized I wasn't fixing anything. Talia held her stare. Then what are you doing here? A long silence. Not hesitation. Containment. Finally, Serena spoke. I think you already fixed something they don't understand. Talia's voice lowered. And you want to study it? Serena shook her head once. No. A pause. I want to understand the person who built it. That landed. Not as flattery. As curiosity sharpened into something more personal than either of them had agreed to acknowledge. Talia stepped closer again. Close enough now that the air between them felt narrowed. You don't get to study me, she said quietly. Serena's voice softened. I'm not trying to own you. Talia's eyes narrowed slightly. That's what they all say before they try. Serena didn't step back. Didn't advance either. Just held her ground. I'm not them. A beat. Talia didn't answer immediately. Because her mind agreed with that statement far more easily than it should have. And that was the problem. Her heart, traitorous and loud, was already less skeptical than her mind. Outside, the land kept moving. Inside, nothing was stable anymore. Talia finally spoke. Then you'll leave when I tell you to. Serena nodded once. Yes. A pause. And if I don't? Serena's expression softened slightly. Then, quietly. Then I'll leave when you ask me to. That did it. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just enough to change the shape of the room. Talia looked at her for a long moment. Still not trusting her. Still not lowering her guard. But something had shifted. Because Serena Grayscale had just offered something rare in Talia's world. Control. Not taken. Given. And Talia Moretti did not yet know what to do with that. Chapter 12. The Whisper Behind Glass. Talia didn't sit down. That was intentional. Serena stayed standing too, like neither of them trusted furniture to behave properly under the weight of truth. The office hummed softly around them, screens glowing, reports waiting, the constant low pulse of an empire in motion. Outside, machines continued their patient work of turning ruin into value. Talia crossed her arms. Talk, she said simply. Serena exhaled once, slow. Not nervous. Deciding. I didn't come back to negotiate, she said. Talia's gaze sharpened. You said that already. I know. Serena stepped slightly closer, then stopped before it became anything else. But I didn't tell you the full reason. Silence tightened. Talia waited. Serena's eyes flicked briefly toward the window, where steel barns cut into the horizon like scars. My family thinks I'm returning to stabilize Grayscale Sustainability's expansion strategy, she said. Talia gave a dry laugh. That sounds like corporate poetry for control the mess. Serena's mouth twitched. It is. A beat. Then the shift came. Serena's voice lowered. I'm not stabilizing anything. Talia didn't move. Serena continued. I'm preparing to expose them. The room changed temperature. Not metaphorically. Talia felt it physically. Her arms loosened slightly before she caught herself. Expose them how? She asked carefully. Serena met her eyes directly. Systematically. Talia studied her. You're talking like a lawsuit. I'm talking like a collapse. That landed heavier. Talia's jaw tightened. Serena didn't stop now. I've spent years inside their structure, she said. I know where everything sits. Contracts. Waste disposal channels. Shell companies. The regulatory capture points they've embedded in 3 different states. Talia's expression darkened slightly. Serena stepped closer again, slower this time. I didn't leave Europe just to observe this, she continued. I left because I started building the framework to take them down properly. Talia narrowed her eyes. And Grayscale doesn't know this. No. Your father doesn't know this. A flicker. No. Talia's voice dropped. So you're a ghost inside your own family. Serena's answer came quietly. Yes. That word should have felt dramatic. It didn't. It felt factual, which made it worse. Talia turned away slightly, processing. You came here to what, she said. Test me? Recruit me? Use me as evidence. Serena didn't hesitate. No. Talia looked back sharply. Serena held her gaze. I came here because I needed to understand what Grayscale cannot replicate. Talia's expression hardened. And that is. Serena's voice softened. You. Silence snapped into place. Sharp. Immediate. Talia stared at her. Then let out a short, incredulous breath. That's a dangerous thing to say in a room full of legal exposure and machinery. I know. Talia stepped forward now. Properly. Closing distance. Explain. Serena didn't retreat. Of course she didn't. I've seen their systems fail, she said. I've seen their attempts at remediation. I've seen their green initiatives. A faint, bitter smile. They're all versions of the same lie. Talia's eyes narrowed slightly. Serena continued. And then I saw what you did with land they destroyed. Talia's voice went colder. You saw compost. I saw reversal. That word hit differently. Talia paused. Serena stepped closer again, just enough that the air between them tightened. You didn't just repair soil, Serena said quietly. You built a system that turns their waste stream into independence. Talia didn't respond. Because she understood what was coming now. Serena's next words confirmed it. That's not something they can buy, she said. Not fully. Not without dismantling you first. Talia's jaw clenched. And you're here because. Serena finally said it. I'm going to dismantle them first. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Talia stared at her. Then slowly, dangerously softly. You're planning to destroy your own family. Serena didn't flinch. Yes. The simplicity of it was the shock. No dramatics. No hesitation. Just a line drawn cleanly through inheritance. Talia's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing her face. Not sympathy. Not approval. Assessment. You're either brave, Talia said quietly, or reckless. Serena's gaze softened slightly. Probably both. Talia let out a slow breath through her nose. Then. And you expect me to trust you while you do that? Serena shook her head once. No. That confused Talia. Serena continued. I don't expect trust. A pause. I intend to earn it. Talia's laugh came out sharper this time. That's ambitious. Serena's voice lowered. I've spent my life inside systems that reward ambition. Talia held her gaze. And what makes this different? Serena didn't answer immediately. Then, quieter. Because you didn't need me. That landed differently. Talia's expression flickered. Serena stepped closer again, but this time slower. Careful. Measured. I arrived thinking I was stepping into another negotiation, she said. Another acquisition conflict. Another controlled asset. Her eyes stayed locked on Talia's. And instead, I found something they don't understand how to classify. Talia's voice turned sharper. I'm not a mystery. Serena nodded. I know. A beat. That's the problem. Silence expanded again. Outside, a truck shifted gears somewhere in the yard. Inside, everything felt closer than it should. Talia finally spoke. So what now? Serena held her gaze. Now I go back. Talia blinked once. That was not what she expected. You leave. Yes. And continue pretending to be loyal. Yes. Talia narrowed her eyes. And I'm supposed to just believe you'll come back to me instead of them? Serena's expression softened. No. That word again. Honest. Unprotected. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Serena said quietly. I'm asking you to watch. A pause. And decide what I am when I return. Talia studied her for a long moment. The traitorous part of her, annoyingly present, stubbornly awake, wanted to believe her immediately. The rest of her did not move. Serena stepped back now, creating space again. Not retreat. Respect. At the door, she paused. Looked back once. And for the first time, the corporate mask didn't fully return. I'll come back, Serena said softly. Talia didn't answer. Serena's eyes held hers. But this time, she added, voice lower, not as grayscale. A beat. Then, almost like a promise carved carefully into stone. On your terms. And then she was gone, leaving Talia standing in a room full of machines, power, and certainty, wondering why the most dangerous thing she had ever heard sounded suspiciously like trust trying to learn how to breathe. Chapter 13. After the quiet breaks. Talia didn't move for a long time. Not because she was stunned. Because she was calculating. That was the difference people always missed about her. Emotion didn't paralyze her. It refined her focus. The office hummed around her, alive with systems she had built from the ground up. Every screen, every report, every moving piece of machinery outside the glass was part of something she controlled. And yet, Serena Grayscale had just walked in, dropped a controlled confession like a match in dry grass, and walked back out again like consequences were optional. Talia exhaled slowly. No, she muttered to herself. Nothing about that is optional. She walked to the window. Watched the gravel road where Serena's truck had disappeared. Still fresh tire marks in the dust. Like proof. Mateo's voice came through the comm on her desk. You want me to track her vehicle? Talia didn't turn. No. A pause. That's not the game. Mateo hesitated. What game is it then? Talia's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not sure she's playing one. That unsettled her more than anything else. Because people always played games. Grayscale. Lawyers. Boardrooms. Even criminals. But Serena spoke like someone stepping in and out of roles rather than hiding behind them. Talia turned away from the window. Call legal, she said. Mateo responded immediately. Already? Yes. What do you want drafted? Talia paused. Then, nothing yet. A beat. Just make sure they're ready. Mateo didn't ask further questions. Good. Serena drove with both hands on the wheel, but her mind was elsewhere. The Texas road stretched long and empty ahead of her, heat shimmering above the asphalt like a second horizon. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something far more complicated. Exposure. Not the legal kind. The internal kind. Talia Moretti had not reacted like the others. No panic. No immediate leverage play. No attempt to bind Serena to promises or extract advantage. She had listened. Watched. Decided nothing too quickly. That alone made her dangerous. Serena exhaled through her nose, eyes fixed on the road. "You didn't need me," she murmured again. That was the part that wouldn't leave her alone. Because it was true. Talia Moretti was already built. Already stable. Already expanding. Serena was not entering a fragile system she could influence. She was stepping into something self-sustaining. And worse. Something that had looked at her like it recognized her. Her phone vibrated once. Franklin. She ignored it. Then again. Daniel. Ignored. Then a third time. Unknown board line. She turned it off completely. Back at Grayscale headquarters, Franklin was not pacing this time. He was sitting. Which meant the situation had shifted into something he didn't know how to physically process. Daniel stood at the glass wall, reviewing internal updates. Serena's absence was already creating ripples. She didn't go to any scheduled meetings, Franklin said flatly. Daniel didn't turn. "I'm aware." Franklin leaned forward. "She's with her." That her needed no explanation. Daniel closed the file slowly. "If she is aligning with Moretti, we reassess containment." Franklin laughed once. Containment. Like Serena was a variable again. "She's not aligning," Franklin said. I don't know what she's doing." Daniel finally turned. His expression was controlled, but tight. "That is what concerns me." Franklin rubbed his face. "She came back for a reason." "Yes. And it wasn't loyalty." Daniel said nothing. Because that part was obvious. Franklin looked up. "She's not one of us right now." A pause. Daniel corrected quietly. "She has never been fully one of us." That silence landed heavier than intended. Serena arrived back at the outskirts of Grayscale property just after dusk. She didn't enter the main building. She stopped at a smaller administrative annex instead. A place where decisions were filed, not made. She sat in her car for a moment. Still. Breathing steady. Then she got out. Inside, everything was too clean. Too quiet. A clerk looked up. "Miss Grayscale, your father is requesting a briefing." Serena nodded. "I know." The clerk hesitated. "There's also board pressure regarding your field visit." "I know that too." No surprise. No urgency. Just acknowledgement. She walked past them into a private office and closed the door behind her. Only then did she allow herself a single thought that did not belong to Grayscale. Talia didn't trust her. Good. That meant she was paying attention. Serena sat down and opened her laptop. Encrypted channels. Internal tracking. Legal sequencing. The machinery of collapse, carefully assembled over years. But now, it felt different. Because there was a variable in the system she had not accounted for. Not in code. Not in law. In presence. Talia Moretti wasn't just a target in a strategy anymore. She was an interruption Serena could not classify. And that made everything unstable. Serena typed slowly. Then paused. Her cursor hovered. She closed the laptop halfway. Leaning back slightly. For the first time in a long time. She didn't immediately know what came next. And somewhere far away, on land built from waste, resistance, and impossible growth, Talia Moretti was doing the same thing. Not stopping. Not doubting. Just recalibrating something that had quietly changed shape inside her world. Without permission. Without warning. And without asking either of them if they were ready. Chapter 15. The leak that wasn't a leak. It didn't explode. It seeped. That was what made it worse. By the time Grayscale noticed, the first fractures were already embedded in 3 separate regulatory channels. Not headlines. Not scandals. Just discrepancies. A permit that didn't match its environmental impact report. A waste contract that referenced a facility that no longer existed. A compliance certificate signed by a consultant who had been dead for 2 years. Small things. Quiet things. Things that, when stacked together, began to look like intent. Franklin slammed the folder onto Daniel's desk. This is happening now. Daniel didn't look surprised. That was the part Franklin hated most. You expected it, Franklin snapped. I expected movement, Daniel corrected. Not exposure yet. Franklin paced. It's everywhere. 3 states. 2 international filings. Someone is threading inconsistencies into the system like a knife. Daniel finally looked up. Not someone, he said quietly. Franklin stopped. Serena. Daniel nodded once. But there was something else in his expression now. Something tighter. Or someone using Serena's framework. Franklin's eyes narrowed. You think she's being framed? Daniel hesitated. No. A pause. I think she built something that no longer requires her direct input to operate. That landed heavily. Franklin sat down slowly. So she set this in motion. Daniel corrected. She started it. A beat. And now it's moving on its own. Serena stood in Talia's barn office when her phone lit up. One message. Daniel. We have containment breach indicators across compliance channels. Explain your involvement. Serena stared at it for a long moment. Then typed. There is no breach. Sent. She didn't elaborate. Because there was nothing to explain in the way they wanted. Grayscale assumed exposure meant a leak. A failure. A mistake. But this wasn't a leak. It was alignment. And Serena had spent years building a system that only appeared dormant until it was understood correctly. She closed the phone. Looked up. Talia was leaning against the desk. Arms crossed. Watching her. Not soft. Not trusting. But fully attentive. You look like someone who just burned a bridge, Talia said. Serena's mouth curved slightly. I didn't burn it. Talia raised an eyebrow. I strengthened it. That made Talia pause. Serena continued calmly. They're seeing inconsistencies across their entire compliance network. Talia's expression sharpened. Good. Serena shook her head once. It's not an attack. Talia studied her. Then what is it? Serena's voice lowered slightly. A mirror. Silence. Talia straightened. You built a system that reflects them back at themselves. Yes. Talia's eyes narrowed. And they don't realize it yet. No. A beat. That's the dangerous part. Across Grayscale headquarters, alarms didn't sound. That was intentional. Daniel preferred silence when systems failed. Less panic. More control illusion. But his screen was no longer cooperating. Data clusters were reordering themselves. Not collapsing. Rewriting. Franklin stared at the display. This is impossible. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Because he was watching something worse. The compliance network wasn't being hacked in the traditional sense. There were no external intrusion points. No brute force. No identifiable origin. Just internal logic shifting. Franklin's voice dropped. Tell me she didn't build something that can operate inside our structure. Daniel's silence was answer enough. Serena finally spoke again. They'll trace it, she said. Talia nodded once. Of course they will. Serena watched her carefully. And when they do. Talia finished the thought without hesitation. They'll come for you. Serena didn't deny it. Talia pushed off the desk slowly. Is that why you came back here? She asked. Serena met her gaze. No. A pause. I came back because I wanted to understand you. Talia's expression tightened slightly. And now? Serena didn't look away. Now I understand what I built before I met you. That shifted something in the room again. Not romantically. Structurally. Talia stepped closer. You're telling me this system is already alive inside them. Serena nodded. Yes. And you didn't warn them. Another nod. Talia exhaled slowly through her nose. So what happens when they finally realize it's you? Serena's voice stayed calm. Then they'll try to isolate the source. Talia's eyes narrowed. And destroy it. Serena corrected softly. Contain it. A beat. Talia's gaze sharpened. And will they succeed? Serena held her gaze for a long moment. Then, quietly. No. That single word landed like weight being dropped into deep water. Not loud. Not dramatic. Certain. Back at Grayscale, Franklin finally asked the question no one had wanted to say out loud. If we can't stop it. Daniel looked at him. What do we do? Daniel paused. Then said something that didn't sound like control anymore. It sounded like survival. We adapt faster than it spreads. Franklin's expression darkened. And Serena? Daniel looked at the screen again, where systems were quietly rewriting themselves into something Grayscale no longer fully recognized. She is no longer the variable, Daniel said. Franklin frowned. What is she then? Daniel answered after a long pause. The origin point. And far away, on land built from decay turned into life. Talia Moretti stood beside Serena Grayscale and realized something with unsettling clarity. Whatever Serena had started inside Grayscale was no longer just corporate warfare. It was becoming architecture. And architecture, once built correctly, did not ask permission to stand. Chapter 16. When the glass finally cracks. Grayscale did what powerful systems always do when they feel the ground shift. It overcorrected. Hard. And in overcorrection, it revealed itself. It started with a single injunction request. Then another. Then a cascade of emergency internal filings that should have stayed buried in legal silence, but instead crossed the wrong threshold at the wrong time. Because Serena's mirror had not just reflected Grayscale. It had flagged it. Quietly. Continuously. Across jurisdictions that did not talk to each other until someone forced them to look at the same truth. And now they were looking. Franklin stood in the boardroom as the first official notice hit the system. His face drained of color. This is a joke, he said. No one laughed. Daniel was already reading. No, Daniel said quietly. It's not. The screen updated again. Another notification. Then another. Then a final one that silenced the room entirely. SEC investigation initiated. Environmental compliance audit escalated to federal review. International regulatory coordination activated. Franklin sat down without meaning to. That's impossible, he whispered. Daniel's voice was controlled, but tighter now. No, he corrected. It's just late. Franklin looked up sharply. Late for what? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was sitting in every file Serena had ever touched. And, more importantly, every file she had not touched directly. This didn't start today, Daniel said quietly. Franklin's voice cracked slightly. Then when did it start? A long pause. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the glass wall of Grayscale headquarters. Toward a city that still believed corporations controlled consequence. Years ago, he said. Silence collapsed inward. Serena stood at the edge of Moretti land when her phone finally lit up again. Not Franklin. Not Daniel. Not internal. Unknown federal line. She answered. No hesitation. A voice on the other end was calm. Professional. Measured. Ms. Grayscale. Serena closed her eyes briefly. So it had reached them. Yes, she said. We are initiating formal review into Grayscale Environmental Holdings and associated subsidiaries. Serena nodded slightly. I expected as much. A pause. Then the voice shifted. Your name appears across multiple advisory threads. Serena exhaled slowly. That's correct. Another pause. And your role? Serena looked out across Talia's land. The barns. The soil. The systems that turned destruction into renewal. Then she answered. Whistleblower. The word landed clean. No drama. No hesitation. Just fact. At Grayscale, panic finally arrived. Not emotional panic. Structural panic. Franklin was speaking too fast. Daniel was issuing containment orders that no longer had stable inputs. Legal teams were requesting clarifications that no one could safely answer. Because every answer now led somewhere worse. Shut down external filings, Franklin ordered. We can't, Daniel replied sharply. The SEC already has mirrored access logs. Franklin stared at him. Mirrored? Daniel's jaw tightened. Everything she built. It wasn't just internal mapping. A beat. It was audit visibility. Franklin's voice dropped. She built a second version of us. Daniel nodded once. And then let us run inside it. That was the moment the board understood something they had never been forced to understand before. They were not being attacked. They were being read. On Moretti land, Talia stood beside Serena in silence. Sirens were not here yet. But they were coming. Both of them knew it. Talia finally spoke. So it's done. Serena didn't correct her. Not technically. Yes. Talia looked at her. Not with shock now. With something quieter. Respect sharpened by inevitability. They'll come for you too, Talia said. Serena nodded once. Yes. Talia studied her for a long moment. You knew this would happen. Serena's answer was simple. Yes. A pause. Then Talia asked the only question that mattered now. Why tell me everything? Serena turned slightly toward her. And for once there was no corporate language left in her voice. Because I don't build things I can't stand inside alone, she said quietly. Talia didn't respond immediately. The wind moved through the barns. Through soil that had once been waste. Through a system built from refusal. Then Talia stepped closer. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that the space between them stopped pretending it was neutral. You're going to be buried in this, Talia said. Serena met her gaze. No, she replied softly. A beat. Not buried. Another pause. Redirected. And then the world caught up. Not slowly. Not politely. Agents arrived first at Grayscale headquarters. Then federal auditors. Then regulatory enforcement teams that had spent years waiting for exactly this kind of structural contradiction to surface. The boardroom emptied into procedure. Daniel disappeared into legal containment operations that no longer had clean exits. Franklin stood frozen as his family name stopped behaving like protection and started behaving like evidence. And, somewhere in the middle of it all, the system Serena Grayscale had quietly built stopped being invisible and became official. On Moretti land, the sirens were still distant. But Talia and Serena stood facing each other as the horizon shifted. Not toward chaos. Toward consequence. Talia exhaled slowly. You didn't come here to fix them, she said quietly. Serena shook her head once. No. A pause. I came here because I finally understood how. Talia studied her. And me? Serena's gaze softened just slightly. You were the part one didn't know I was missing from the equation. Silence settled between them. Not ending. Not beginning. Just suspended. Then Talia stepped back slightly, looking out across her land. Alive. Expanding. Unbroken. They're going to remember this place, she said quietly. Serena followed her gaze. Yes. Talia's voice turned lower. As the place that ended them. Serena didn't correct her. Because for once, that was exactly what the system had become. And as the first official vehicles appeared on the distant road, cutting through dust toward both Empire and Farm alike, two women stood on opposite sides of a single truth finally exposed. Some systems don't fall. They are rewritten. And sometimes, the person holding the pen is the one everyone underestimated. Chapter 17. The witness who didn't tremble. The courtroom did not feel like justice. It felt like containment dressed in wood and law. Polished benches. Careful lighting. Too many eyes pretending neutrality. Grayscale's legal team sat on one side like a unified wall of expensive restraint. On the other side, regulators, federal counsel, SEC representatives, sharp, patient, already holding the shape of the case before it was even spoken aloud. And at the center of it all, Serena Grayscale. No corporate armor today. No family title spoken like currency. Just a witness designation that stripped everything down to function. Whistleblower. The word had spread through every filing, every notice, every corridor of authority that mattered. And now it sat in the room like a loaded chamber. Franklin was not there at first. He arrived late. Of course he did. Like denial still had scheduling privileges. Daniel was already seated, expression controlled in the way men look when they are trying not to watch their own systems collapse in real time. Serena did not look at either of them yet. She looked forward. Because forward was the only direction left that didn't belong to Grayscale. The judge entered. Procedural opening. Formal acknowledgments. Then the shift. Call the witness. A pause. And then, Serena Grayscale. The room changed temperature. Franklin leaned forward slightly without realizing it. Daniel did not move. Serena stood. Not slowly. Not dramatically. Just cleanly. Like someone stepping out of a structure she had already left internally. She walked to the stand. Took the oath. No hesitation. No performance. Her voice carried evenly through the courtroom. Clear enough to cut through strategy. Calm enough to be believed. State your role within Grayscale Environmental Holdings. Serena's eyes stayed forward. I am a former internal legal advisor and compliance analyst. A pause. Former, the prosecutor repeated carefully. Yes. No emotion attached. Just classification. The questioning began. Systems. Contracts. Environmental audits. Waste disposal chains. Regulatory manipulation. Each answer landed like another brick removed from a wall that had never been meant to stand honestly. The defense tried to interrupt. Object. Redirect. Contain. But Serena did not waver. She didn't argue. She explained. And that was worse. Because argument leaves room for interpretation. Explanation leaves none. Franklin watched from the back row now, slowly realizing something he had not wanted to admit since the beginning. Serena was not defending herself. She was documenting him. Not personally. Structurally. Daniel noticed it too. His jaw tightened once. Just once. Then he wrote something down. Not for defense. For damage mapping. Did you personally authorize disclosure of internal documents to external parties? The defense counsel asked sharply. Serena finally turned slightly. Just enough to acknowledge the question. Yes. A murmur in the room. Franklin's hands clenched. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Were you acting under instruction from Grayscale leadership? No. A pause. Then why did you disclose confidential materials? Silence tightened. Serena's voice lowered slightly. Because the system was not self-correcting. That line landed harder than anything else so far. Even the judge looked up slightly. Then came the question everyone had been circling. Are you aware that your actions contributed to federal escalation and potential corporate collapse? Franklin leaned forward again. Waiting. Hoping for hesitation. For fracture. For something he could still categorize as betrayal. Serena answered immediately. Yes. No apology. No regret. Just consequence acknowledged. The prosecutor stepped in. Did you anticipate this outcome? Serena paused for the first time. Not uncertainty. Precision. Then, yes. A shift in the room. Then explain your intent. Serena inhaled slowly. And when she spoke again, her voice carried something quieter than authority. Clearer than strategy. I intended visibility, she said. A pause. so that containment would no longer be possible. Franklin went still. Daniel's pen stopped moving. Because that was the sentence that changed everything. Not accusation. Not defense. Declaration. Break. Evidence submitted. Cross-examination. Documents projected onto screens that now felt too small to hold what they contained. Maps of Grayscale's internal architecture unfolded across the courtroom like an anatomy lesson nobody had consented to. Franklin watched his own world become legible. Daniel watched it become irreversible. Finally, the defense made one last attempt. "You are family to the Grayscale entity," they said. "Does that not create bias in your testimony?" A pause. The room leaned in. This was meant to fracture her. Serena looked up. And for the first time, there was something almost human in her expression. Not weakness. Clarity. "Yes," she said. Then added softly, "That's why I waited so long." Silence. Even the air felt paused. When the court recessed briefly, Serena remained seated. Not shaken. Not triumphant. Just present. Franklin finally stood. Walked toward her. Stopped a few feet away. "You destroyed us," he said quietly. Serena looked at him. Not cruelly. Not warmly. Honestly. "No," she replied. A pause. "I exposed what you were already doing." That landed differently. Franklin searched her face for something: guilt, satisfaction, justification. Found none of it. Only structure. Only consequence. Only truth that refused to soften itself. From the gallery, Daniel watched her carefully. Not as an adversary anymore. As an analyst watching something evolve beyond classification. Because the most dangerous thing about Serena Grayscale was no longer what she had done. It was that she had done it without losing coherence. Without breaking. Without becoming what they expected a whistleblower to be. When Serena finally left the stand for the last time that day, she did not look back at Grayscale. Not once. But as she exited the courtroom, she paused just briefly at the door. Outside waited consequence. Inside remained collapse. And, somewhere far beyond both, Talia Moretti's land, still standing. Still growing. Still alive. Serena's expression shifted only slightly. A quiet understanding passing through her like wind through open steel. Then she stepped out into the light. And the case that would dismantle Grayscale finally stopped being theory and became history. Chapter 18. Terms of Arrival. Talia watched the courtroom feed on a cracked tablet balanced against a crate of soil samples. Not because she needed updates. Because she couldn't not. Serena stood in the center of it all like a blade finally placed on a table where everyone could see its edge. Calm voice. Clean facts. No hesitation. No theatrics. Franklin's world didn't explode. It unraveled. Slowly enough to feel deliberate. Talia's thumb paused on the screen as Serena answered the final question. Not breaking. Not softening. Just deciding out loud what truth cost. When it ended, the courtroom didn't cheer. It just exhaled. Like something heavy had been carried out of the room and nobody yet knew what to do with the space it left behind. Talia set the tablet down. The barn around her kept working. Filters. Heat. Motion. Life. But her mind stayed still. Serena did it. Not for Grayscale. Not for the court. Not even for justice. Not in the way people like to package it. She did it like someone closing a door that had been left open too long. Talia leaned back against the crate. And waited. Because she expected the next move to be obvious. Serena would come here. Of course she would. There was nowhere else that made sense anymore. The case was over. The system had been exposed. The line between them was gone. Talia's fingers tapped once against her arm. Time passed. Nothing. No truck. No call. No silhouette appearing at the edge of the land like it belonged there. Only silence. Then realization slipped in slowly, like water finding a crack. On your terms. Talia exhaled sharply through her nose. You infuriating woman, she muttered. Not angry. Not really. Something closer to recognition finally turning inward. Serena wasn't avoiding her. She was waiting. By the time the sun dipped low, Talia had made her decision. Matteo found her at the fence line. You're leaving, he asked. Talia adjusted her jacket, eyes still on the horizon. I'm going to extend an invitation, she said. Matteo raised an eyebrow. To who? Talia's mouth curved slightly. You already know. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Careful, he said. Talia finally looked at him. I've never been careful, she replied, and walked past him like certainty had learned to wear boots. Serena didn't hear the knock. She heard the engine first. A low, steady approach through gravel and dusk. She stood at the edge of the temporary accommodation she'd been using since leaving court filings in motion. A place too neutral to feel like belonging anywhere. The vehicle stopped outside. No hesitation. No escort. No grayscale. Serena stepped outside and saw Talia Moretti leaning against her truck like she had been there the entire time the world was collapsing. Dust still hung in the air behind her. Wind tugged lightly at her sleeves. And her expression. Not cautious. Not uncertain. Decided. Serena exhaled slowly. So this was it. The return condition. Talia didn't move at first. Just looked at her. Really looked. Not like a witness. Not like a strategist. Like someone who had finally stopped pretending they didn't already know the shape of the answer. You said it would be on my terms, Talia said quietly. Serena nodded once. Yes. Talia pushed off the truck. Walked closer. Not rushing. Not hesitating. Distance disappeared in a way that felt less like motion and more like inevitability. I watched you, Talia said. Serena's gaze didn't break. I know. Talia stopped just short of her. Close enough now that everything else fell away. The case. Grayscale. The noise of collapse still echoing somewhere far behind them. You took them apart, Talia said. Serena's voice softened. They took themselves apart. I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. Talia studied her for a long moment. Then, you still came back alone. Serena nodded again. Yes. A pause. No board. No Franklin. No distance. Something shifted in Talia's expression then. Not softness. Permission. I don't do shared control, Talia said. Serena's mouth curved faintly. I don't do ownership. That made Talia pause. Just slightly. Because that was the closest they had come to agreement since the beginning. Wind moved between them. Quiet. Unhurried. Talia stepped closer again. Now there was no space left pretending to be neutral. Then what do you do? She asked. Serena didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't about systems anymore. It hadn't been for a while. Finally, she said it simply. I stay, she said. Talia held her gaze. And if I tell you to leave? Serena didn't hesitate. I leave. A beat. And if you don't? Serena's voice lowered. Then I stay longer. Something in Talia's expression shifted then. Not breaking. Not softening. Unlocking. Like a door finally recognizing its own key. Talia lifted a hand slowly. Not touching yet. Just close enough for the air between them to change temperature. You don't get to rebuild what you just burned, she said quietly. Serena's gaze stayed steady. I'm not trying to rebuild anything. Talia stepped in fully now. Close enough that the world outside them stopped mattering entirely. Then why are you here? She asked. Serena's answer came softer than everything she had said in court. Because I don't think I finished understanding you. A silence. Deep. Complete. Talia studied her face for a long moment. Then finally, very quietly. You don't understand what that means. Serena's eyes didn't waver. I think I do. Talia exhaled once. Slow. Controlled. Then she closed the remaining space between them. No hesitation. No warning. No barrier left to maintain. And when her hand finally touched Serena's, it wasn't an ending. It was recognition finally allowed to become real. Chapter 19. Barefoot Agreements. Morning didn't arrive so much as it settled in. Soft light sliding across the room like it didn't want to interrupt anything important. Talia woke first. Of course she did. Old habit. Land always wakes before its owners. She lay still for a moment, listening. No alarms. No courtrooms. No grayscale. Just the quiet hum of distant systems and the steadier rhythm of someone beside her who had not disappeared in the night. Serena. Still there. That alone felt like a negotiation Talia hadn't signed, but also hadn't rejected. Talia turned her head slightly. Serena was half awake, hair loose now, expression unguarded in that rare space between sleep and strategy. Not corporate. Not composed. Just human in a way that looked slightly unfamiliar on her. Talia studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Then, very quietly, "You're still here." Serena's eyes opened properly. A slow blink. "Yes," she said, as if that was the simplest fact in the world. Talia gave a short breath that almost became a laugh. "That's new." Serena's mouth curved faintly. "I can leave if it helps your data analysis." Talia turned onto her back now, staring at the ceiling. "That's not funny." It was slightly funny. It was statistically unnecessary. That earned a real smile from Serena. Talia noticed. And filed it somewhere she wasn't ready to label. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It was shared. Then Talia spoke. "You stayed the night." Serena nodded. "I said I would stay longer if you didn't ask me to leave." Talia turned her head again. "And I didn't." "No," Serena agreed. A beat. "And I didn't leave." Talia exhaled slowly. "That's dangerous." Serena's gaze shifted toward her. "You invited me." Talia snorted softly. "I offered terms. Not habitation rights." Serena's smile deepened slightly. "That sounds like the same thing in your vocabulary." Talia rolled her eyes. "You're already translating me wrong." "I'm learning you," Serena corrected gently. That made Talia go quiet for a second. Because that word again. Learning. Not consuming. Not analyzing. Learning. Talia sat up slowly, pulling a loose shirt over her shoulders. Serena watched her but didn't move. Didn't intrude. Just present. Talia swung her legs off the side of the bed. "You showed up barefoot," she said suddenly. Serena blinked once. "Yes." That unsettled me. A pause. Serena tilted her head slightly. "Because I was unprepared?" "No." Talia stood now, pacing slightly. "Because you didn't perform anything." Serena stayed still. Talia continued, voice lower now. "Everyone performs something when they come onto my land. Business. Authority. Fear. Ego. Even curiosity has a posture." She stopped, looking back at her. "You just arrived." Serena absorbed that quietly. Then, softly, "I didn't want armor." Talia scoffed. "That's not an answer. That's a risk assessment failure." Serena smiled again. "Maybe." Talia turned fully now. Arms crossing. "So now I want to stay in that unsettlement," she said. Serena watched her carefully. Talia continued. "If you'll have me." That landed differently. Serena didn't respond immediately. Not because she was calculating. Because she wasn't. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before. "I don't know how to do this correctly." Talia raised an eyebrow. "Good. I don't trust people who think they do." A faint pause. Then Serena asked, "What is this?" Talia stepped closer again. Not closing distance like before. This time slower. Intentional. "This," she said, gesturing vaguely between them, "is you not leaving when things get uncomfortable." Serena nodded once. I can do that. Talia tilted her head. And me not pretending I don't notice when you're thinking too much. A flicker of amusement. I do think too much, Serena admitted. Talia gave a short laugh. I noticed. Serena's gaze softened slightly. And what else? Talia studied her. Then, very plainly. And you not coming here is grayscale. Serena answered immediately. I'm not. Talia nodded once. Good. A beat. Then, quieter. And you not deciding who I am before I finish becoming it. That one landed deeper. Serena held her gaze. I won't. Talia searched her face for something, hesitation, performance, fracture. Found none. Only steadiness. Only intent that wasn't trying to own anything. Talia exhaled slowly. Then we're already in trouble, she said. Serena's mouth curved. That sounds like your natural habitat. That finally broke something in Talia. A laugh. Real. Short, surprised, unguarded. Serena's eyes widened slightly, like she had just witnessed something rare enough to memorize. Talia wiped her face once, still shaking her head. You're irritating, she said. I've been called worse. I haven't decided if that's a warning or a compliment. It can be both. Talia stepped closer again, this time stopping just in front of her. Looking down at her. You don't get to destabilize my entire life and then stand here looking like you belong in it, she said. Serena looked up at her. Calm. Present. I'm not trying to belong, she said. A pause. I'm trying to be allowed to stay while I don't. That made Talia quiet again. Because that was honest in a way that didn't ask for permission to exist. Talia lifted a hand. Paused just before touching her face. Serena didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't anticipate. That unsettled Talia again. Exactly like the barefoot arrival had. And she liked that. Didn't admit it. But she liked it. Her fingers finally touched Serena's cheek lightly. Warm. Real. You're still here, Talia said again, softer this time. Serena leaned into the touch slightly. Yes. Talia's mouth curved faintly. On my terms. Serena nodded. On your terms. A pause. Then Talia sighed. Then don't get comfortable. Serena's eyes softened. I won't. Another beat. Talia dropped her hand slowly. But didn't step away. Good, she said. Then, quieter. Stay anyway. And in that small contradiction between warning and invitation, control and surrender, certainty and unsettlement, Serena Grayscale stayed. Epilogue. What grows after the collapse? The world did what worlds always do after something large falls. It adjusted its posture. It rewrote headlines. It reshuffled leadership. It rebranded failure into reform and called it progress. Grayscale became a case study. Not a legacy. A warning dressed in legal language. Franklin disappeared from public view inside a carefully managed restructuring agreement that kept him out of prison and out of relevance at the same time. Daniel stayed longer. Long enough to ensure the machinery stopped bleeding in the right places. Long enough to understand, privately, that Serena hadn't destroyed the system. She had simply forced it to confess itself. And confession, once recorded, cannot be unspoken. On Moretti land, nothing was rebranded. It just kept growing. Barns expanded quietly. Soil systems improved. Contracts shifted from emergency buyers to long-term ecological partners who stopped asking for miracles and started respecting processes. Talia didn't announce anything. She never did. The empire was not a monument. It was a function. And functions don't need applause. Serena stayed. Not as Grayscale. Not as consultant. Not as anything that could be filed under someone else's ownership. Just Serena. At first, she worked in silence. Learning rhythms instead of systems. Waking before sunrise without being told. Standing in fields without checking outcomes. Talia watched her the way she watched weather patterns. Not controlling them. understanding them, and sometimes still slightly unsettled by them. Especially the barefoot mornings that continued without explanation. Serena never stopped doing it. Talia never asked her to. One evening, months later, they stood at the edge of the land. The sun low, turning everything gold at the edges. Talia leaned against the fence post. Serena stood beside her. Not touching. Not performing distance either. Just there. It's quieter now, Talia said. Serena nodded. Yes. A pause. Talia glanced at her. You ever miss it? Serena didn't ask what it meant. She already knew. The boardrooms. The systems. The certainty of knowing where every lever sat. No, she said simply. Talia studied her. That was fast. Serena's mouth curved slightly. It wasn't. A beat. Then she added. It just stopped feeling like mine a long time ago. Silence settled between them again. Comfortable now. Not careful. Talia exhaled slowly. You still unsettle me, she said. Serena turned her head slightly. That wasn't a condition I agreed to remove. Talia laughed softly. No, she admitted. It wasn't. Another pause. Then Talia looked out over the land. What are we then? She asked. Serena didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't know. Because she refused to define it too early. Finally. We're still learning, she said. Talia nodded once. That's a dangerous answer. Serena glanced at her. It's the only honest one. Talia considered that. Then stepped a little closer. Not closing distance completely. Just enough that it mattered. Good, she said. A pause. And if you leave? Serena looked at her fully now. I won't, she said. Talia raised an eyebrow. You said that before. Serena's gaze stayed steady. I meant it differently then. That made Talia quiet. Serena continued, softer now. Before, I meant I would stay if you allowed it. A beat. Now I mean I stay because I chose to. Talia studied her for a long moment. Then nodded slowly. Progress, she said. Serena's smile came faint, almost private. On your terms. Talia turned her head slightly, looking at her properly now. No, she said. A pause. On ours. And that was the first time neither of them corrected the word. The wind moved through the fields. The land kept growing. And whatever they had built from ruin, exposure, and impossible understanding did not end when the world stopped watching. It simply continued. Quietly. Deliberately. Barefoot where it chose to be.